when the night hits and the moon is shining, we all need the story of the best storyteller.
So stories, I think, are important because they tap into like this universal experience that we all have.
I think it's important to tell stories because it enriches, I guess, the creativity and imagination of someone. And I think even though as you're growing up you might not need it as much, I think it's still very key for maturity purposes.
Which is this concept of, well, first we have like the beginning, the middle, and the end, and then we have the hero and the villain, or the hero and the antagonist, and somebody being saved. And these are all, I think, part of our archetypal, you know, our collective unconscious, and we all have like this need to kind of hear stories.
I read this one last year for English class, but I really liked it. It's The Things They Carried. I can't tell you the author's name, but it's about, you know, I guess a platoon of soldiers during the Vietnam War and what they had during the war that was, I guess, their lucky charm for them to, I guess, keep going. And yeah, I thought it was a really good book. The story was really nice, and the characters had good development throughout the story, so I liked it.
Yeah, I can tell you a story. This is a story about my grandparents, and these are my favorite stories. So my grandma and my grandpa lived in Isleta, Texas. They were best friends. They would do all sorts of things together. It was very, very rural back then. It was very much farmland, and they would just kind of run amok. Well, they went to Isleta High School, both of them, and they were both in the same grade. So one day my grandfather asked my grandmother to go to a dance with him, and she of course said yes, and she was very excited about it. Well, it started to rain and rain. It was like a Friday night. It was raining and raining and raining. My grandmother's all dressed up and looks nice, and she gets a call on the phone. The person on the end was my grandfather, and he said, "I'm sorry, Lucille, I can't come and pick you up." And she said, "Why?" And he said, "Because the bridge is out. I can't make it across the bridge." And she was like, "What?" She's like, I'm sorry, I can't go to the party or the dance with you tonight." Well, my grandmother got really, really upset, to say the least. She was very angry. So she called up another friend of hers and said, "Will you go to the dance with me instead? Because Richard says he can't come pick me up because the bridge is washed out." So she ends up going to the dance with her friend, and I never knew who it was, and my grandfather was there with another girl. So he was in big trouble. I loved this story. Growing up, I loved to hear about it, and I think from the time I was really young, my grandmother told this story, and every time that I asked for that story, she would get mad at him all over again, and I just thought it was special.
Well, I can't remember that many, but she just brought it up, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I guess I really liked it. I can't tell you too much about that. That's been a long time.
That stories help make sense of the world for us. So, like in the past, when people would tell stories, it might be a folk tale and explaining some sort of phenomenon that was happening. But then, as things have kind of transpired, I think it's awesome to read a story or to think about a story, and in what ways can I relate to the character. That's super important. When my kids were younger, I could remember stories so much better. I could tell a story off the top of my head and just kind of make it up as I went along, and it would be maybe a story about a cat, you know, a cat that was lonely and found somebody else to love, or, you know, found a home. Just silly stuff like that.
Well, I'd probably try to keep the vocabulary a little low because she's not that smart yet. But I don't know, that's a good question. I have to think about that one. Probably just try to give as many vivid details as I can, make the imagery pop out, and hope she gets a better understanding.
why do I tell stories to my kids? Like, first of all, we know like how important telling stories is for kids' literacy, for their comprehension, for letter recognition, for word recognition, for fluency as they get older. I think that idea of sharing things together, like, you know, is so important. And I wasn't as good about it with my son. I think I stopped reading to him when he was in like 4th or 5th grade. I think I read to him as long as he was tolerant of it. But my daughter, I'll read to her until she tells me to stop.